Well, then, what are the top 5 screenwriters that someone should study? I mean, if they need to know.
Wow, that's a good question.
Going back to
well, if you
long.
go to the the 101 Habits book, so there's a 14 of the top writers recommend that, so you get to see their work, and the new version of the book, the 10th anniversary edition, had 8 new writers, Tony Gilroy and Terry Rossio and all the big names. So between the two, you have 22 writers who are your mentors in their advice to you. In terms of writers that I admire, of course, Pixar storytellers, or Brad Bird and John Lasseter. The thing with John Lasseter too, which is really interesting, just to show you the power that he had as a storyteller, when Disney bought Pixar and John Lasseter became the head of animation, all the Disney animation movies have been successful. Like really great storytelling, starting with Bolt all the way to Tangled, Frozen, even the latest one, Zootopia. So these are not Pixar movies, but you can see the Pixar touch in them, and they've been successful with audiences. So kind of shows you that he's had quite an influence on Disney. So yeah, I admire him. So hundreds and hundreds of writers.
Well, for you, let's say you were in, high school or something, college.
Right.
What were some screenplays where you were like, I've just got to do something like this?
Right. Well, for me, it was mostly genre. So I've always my favorite genres I've always been a sci-fi person. So, and mostly specifically futuristic as opposed to sci-fi. I like to make that distinction. Futuristic is more like in the future, but on Earth, as opposed to Star Trek, Star Wars. Even though I love Star Wars, spaceships in space. I tend to gravitate more towards really thought-provoking stories like Blade Runner, The Matrix, Inception, anything that really has a really thought-provoking concept and story taking place on Earth in the future. Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind is a favorite of mine. So yeah, any thought-provoking movie I tend to like. Film noirs, futuristic, thrillers. I still remember the day I saw Silence of the Lambs. I saw an advanced screening of Silence of the Lambs, and it was the very first movie where I totally was not aware of anything else. Like, I remember the lights went down and you watched the movie, and the next thing I knew was the lights coming out. It's like, my God, just 2 hours went by and I was completely mesmerized from beginning to end every second. That's never happened before in a movie. That was the first time I remember being so taken and engaged by a movie.
What do you think it was, aside from
just great craftsmanship? Yeah, it's just amazing. Like everything about it. An interesting story, compelling characters, great relationships, just fantastic twists and cleverness, and caring about not only the main character but caring about the villain. I mean, it was just great craftsmanship. I mean, kudos to Thomas Harris, who wrote the book. It was very close to the movie, and to Ted Talley, who wrote the screenplay, and Jonathan Demme, who directed. I mean, this was one of the very few movies that swept the top 5 Oscars. You have the best movie, best director, best screenplay, best actor, and best actress. There haven't been that many movies in the history of movies that got those 5. They're considered the pantheon of movies. So you have, like, I remember the very first one was It Happened One Night with Clark Gable and Claudette Colbert. That was another favorite of mine. I'm not sure I believe One Flew of the Cuckoo's Nest also was one of the top 5 awards, if I'm not mistaken. But Silence of the Lambs was the last one, I think. Yeah. I'll have to research that. But I remember, I knew that was an advanced screening, so it was before it opened, and I was like, oh my God, if anybody else has that same experience I've had, this movie's going to be great, classic, sweep the Oscars, I mean, everything. And I was rooting for that film, I remember watching the Oscars when that happened, and just being, wow. Yeah, one of my all-time favorites. And then Blade Runner is one of my top favorites. Although that didn't do as well when it opened, and it was actually considered a flop and only became a classic through word of mouth and just the sheer visual of the story. So.
That's an interesting concept when something doesn't show the numbers, but then there's this cult
Oh
audience
yeah,
that
yeah.
loves it.
There's quite a few movies like that. Shawshank Redemption is another one that kind of flopped, box office, but then created, life of its own just from the sheer, audience. It's like wow that they responded to it.
What is that about? That just
most I would think it's probably about concept. When you look at the concept for Shawshank Redemption, there's nothing appealing about it, right? I mean, okay, this is a movie about, two people in prison, okay. But when you experience it, and this is something too, a lesson for writers, is that just because you don't have a high concept, now if you're a beginning writer, high concept is paramount. It helps you because it helps you break in, because your script will be requested, and then once they get the script in front of them, and if it's well executed, then you're on your way in. But so I don't recommend having low concepts when you're a beginner. But in this case, it was Frank Darabont, it was Stephen King's novella. So, but it was a low concept. There was nothing about the concept that made it appealing. So it didn't really drive audiences to the theaters at the time. But the execution is masterful. And so that's what, once you're in there, once you're in the door and you experience it, then you go, my God. And then you tell others, and word of mouth. That's how it happens, So that's the case with that.